Welcome to What's the Finish, our weekly podcast where we talk to experts and individuals just like you to discuss not only the flavors and finishes of spirits and foods, but also all the flavors life has to offer, along with the magnificent finishes they bring. So join our host, David Aferiat, as he asks the question, what's the finish? Hey, welcome to the latest podcast. We're excited. This is called What's the Finish? And I'm sitting here with David Aferiat. My name is Jeff Cecil. We are currently in Nashville, so we thought we'd kind of launch the podcast while we're driving around. We're getting ready to head to a distributor here in Nashville. And then we're doing amazing tasting tonight. We were able to pull together 8 of the top wine aficionados here in Nashville for a tasting of Avid Vines wines and champagnes, and we're excited that we can do that tonight. So, David, welcome to your podcast. How does it feel?
It feels great, Jeff. I like doing this different format. It's kind of like comedians and coffee in traffic, but we're going to keep eyes on the road and focused and talk a little bit about, you're on a ride along. So
yeah.
This is what it's like to go.
Exactly. So it's a lot of fun. So we're calling the podcast, What's the Finish? Okay. So tell me what that means to you.
Well, it's through the experience of trying something. When we're evaluating wine, when we're evaluating, when we're going through life, there's a start and there's an end. And so what's the finish is kind of like, how are you ending? How are you ending, literally like the wine in the glass? We take the approach and then we take the finish. And the approach is, how does it look? How does it attack the senses? And what is it like to smell it, to see it, to hear the pop go off, and then to look at it, of course. And then the mouthfeel. And after that mouthfeel, there's that finish as it goes down. What's the lingering effect of that? And we want to apply that to not just wine appreciation, but lots of other things we'll discuss in the podcast.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, and personally, the wine works great for me. The champagnes are exciting. I'm excited when we talk about the food too, because that could be a lot of fun, right? I mean, what's the taste that you get when you taste these foods, and what's the finish there?
It's you can't have one without the other. You can have one without the other. Obviously, you can enjoy food, and obviously you can drink wine like it's a cocktail, but that's more of an American concept than it is one in a European one. And so I don't begrudge any of, there's a time for all of that. But these champagnes in particular are food champagnes. They are meant to be paired with food. And why is that? We can get into it a little bit later. But their acidity, for one thing, is makes them the best pairing with food. I'll put it out there. There's not a food that you can't pair with champagne.
All right.
Everything
there you go.
Pizza to anything.
Love it. Love it. So, just for our listeners, because this is new, do me a favor, tell us a little bit about Avid Vines, why you started it, when you started it, and where it's going right now.
Right. So it started out of a passion for wine, and you have to be careful, and you have to protect some of the things that we're passionate about, because if you go in and make a business around them, you could kill it. But it has certainly survived this idea that I had in my mind of really bringing something so authentic to its place into the U.S. And so to do that, I started Avid Vines because I'm a French American. It's always been a part of me, marrying these two cultures, because my family was the product of living in France, in one of the colonies of France, before that area proclaimed its revolution and threw out all the French, natives. This was Algeria, and it divided my family. And my father was one of the first to reunite.
That's interesting.
These families, and so and I tagged along with him. So ever since, that family has meant a lot, and we have strengthened those ties. I myself have lived in France for a period of time. I've raised my children to speak French, and now they're starting their adventures in France. So I was a French-American Chamber of Commerce president for the
cool.
Southeast. So
that's great.
The idea of creating an import company to bring French champagnes into the U.S. now kind of makes a little bit more sense.
Sure, it does. So let's talk about your first import that you're bringing in. It's André Tessier.
Exactly. Well said.
And thank you for teaching me how to say that the right way. I appreciate that. So talk about that. Tell me why them?
Why them? Well, it started in 2018 when I was actually fortunate enough with this idea in my head that we were traveling in Champagne region with my family and my parents in particular, who have trained me, who have always grown up with wine and have great palate. We went to the big houses in Champagne, and they teach you. It's almost like a Disneyland experience. You get on a conveyor belt, and it's like, wow, see the world of Champagne. It's not necessarily a conveyor belt, but it's like that. It's like that. And you learn the rich history, and they do a great job of showing how Champagne is made. Because then, when you go to a smaller house, where these owners are farmers, and they call them owner-growers. They own and they grow the wines and the grapes that go into their wines. They don't buy them from elsewhere.
Got it.
These people don't have the infrastructure to put on a big display and electronics and explain the whole story. No, they're just there to share with you their champagnes, their wines. And I was determined to find these owner-growers, which don't have big addresses and shiny, estates. And I found 2 of them. And the first one we went to was like, okay, middle to average. But the second one was Julien Texier, who his great-grandfather, André, started the Champagne house. And when we tasted them, I just looked at my parents and was like, holy cow, this guy is really, really good. Let's see if he wants to import into the U.S. So I asked him, have you ever exported to the U.S.? He said, no. And I said, right then and there, I thought I would be doing this later in life, but if you make me the exclusive importer for the U.S., I will build a company around this and its brand and bring these in with the care that's needed. We can talk about that in a bit, but
I think that's great.
He said, yes, let's do it.
Awesome. So now 2018, so it took you a while to kind of probably get the plan together, get whatever pieces that you need to fit together. When did you bring the first champagnes into the U.S.?
The first champagnes came in March of 2019.
Okay.
And great timing.
Yeah, right?
Right. So, but they came in around March of 2019. And the interim took me the time to get the licenses, research the regulations, find out how to bring the wines into the U.S. And in particular, from the beginning, I wanted it such that these champagnes have to be brought over on a refrigerated container. There it is. And you'd say, well, of course, but only 5% of all the wine from Europe to the U.S. is ever put into a chilled container.
Really? That's an interesting fact.
Because it's so expensive.
Makes sense.
And then when COVID hit, the containers got even more expensive. The refrigerated ones got even more expensive because they were hard to find. But that's a brand point for Avid Vines. And it's really, I add a lot of value as the importer, but one of the key ways I do that is to protect these wines from the shipping process, the logistics, the supply chain, and keeping them refrigerated during these critical 5-6 weeks that it takes, plus a week at the port stuck in traffic. If you're doing this during any other time of the year, they'll boil. I mean, they don't boil, but they get dulled by being in those containers. And that's why wine never tastes as good as when you're there at the vineyard.
So what you're telling me is that because they're chilled, when we pop open a bottle of this champagne, it'll taste like you're at the vineyard.
It's miraculous, but
that's
that's exactly it.
I love that. Love that.
We collapse the distance, we say.
Yeah, love that. That's amazing. Now this is, if I remember right, you had told me this is an organic champagne. What makes it organic?
Great question. So that's the other brand point of Avid Vines, is that everything in the portfolio now and will be always organic. Certified organic, certified sustainable, and that's because we want the clean experience of what these wines can produce, i.e. no headaches, no histamine reaction, which is inflammation, which leads to a headache. And what makes it organic then is, especially when they're certified, they have to be audited by a third party. Okay. And there are several there's one in Champagne, and there are several in the country that you can qualify for. If you give yourself and your production process over to this audit firm that looks at a 90-point checklist for the air, the water, and the land treatment that are involved in the production process. So you can't spray the vines with chemicals to keep the bugs off. You cannot add Miracle Grow into the fertilizer to juice get that extra grape, like others do, or don't do, but they don't submit it to a certification process.
Got it.
So that's what we do. So
you made an interesting point. You said that the organic process kind of alleviates, if you have a little too much headaches the next day, things of that nature. And is that specifically because it is organic, or because of the chilled containers, or is it a science of all that?
It is really a science of all that, but I put 80% on the fact of how it's the production process, how it's made before it gets on the boat.
Okay. All right, so that's interesting. So organic, again, no pesticides, no sprays, nothing, all natural stuff. Are there other parts, like how do they keep that process within, when they make the champagne? Everything has to be done a certain way, distilled a certain way, things of that nature to keep it all organic? And do they use any other parts of their property, their farms, to help process the champagnes?
Yeah, so there's always, at every step of the way, there's intentionality. And that's what I love, is whether I tell you it, whether you learn it later, whether you go to the vineyard yourself and hear it in French from the winemaker, there's so much thought that goes into how these champagnes are made I want to drink something that has that much care around it. And here's an example. So the wines are harvested. Wonderful. The juices, the grapes are pressed and the juices flow and it's captured, and they're put into wooden barrels for a period of time before they go into even tanks. Actually, they go into tanks, then they go into barrels, and then they go into the bottles. The barrels that these wines rest in for about 18 months are from the property. They're from the town where the grapes are made.
Oh, wow.
Where the grapes are grown, right? So
that's amazing.
The trees add their contribution and affect the mouthfeel, the finish, even add some notes to it. And it's amazing because it's all from one place where the water, the land, the air not only nourish the grapes, but they nourish the trees that form the barrels that the wine from the grapes rest in. It's it's a symphony of place. And that's why we like to say you're drinking like a liquid postcard.
Right. That's awesome. Love it. So we're doing a tasting tonight. What are we going to be tasting?
Well, we're bringing out all the guns here for Nashville. So we'll be tasting all five of the champagnes.
Okay.
And
what makes the five different? Just give me a quick description of each one.
Yeah, good question. So, let's see. There's the softest one, which is led by a Pinot Meunier, a blend that leads with Pinot Meunier. And there's the most expensive one, which is the Vintage. And then there's which is 2012. And then in the three in the middle are Chardonnay, a Blanc de Blanc, a Rosé, and one that's most representative of all of them. It's called the Carte Or, the Gold Carte. It's pretty nice.
That's great. So the Vintage 2012, what can be classified as a vintage? When do you explain that to us?
Well, the vintage means that the grapes come from the same year, the same harvest. All the other ones are non-vintage because they start with maybe 50% from one year and then have blends of previous years. And once you start blending the years, you go to non-vintage. But if they are all from the same year...
got it. Okay, that's interesting to know. Interesting to learn. That's great. And so what can we expect? What can the finish be? What should we be expecting with some of these champagnes that we'll be tasting tonight?
That's the beauty part. That's the beautiful part of it. They're all different. They all sing a different song, and the finish is... some finishes end with like baked apple, and they all end, as I said, with the mouthfeel wise, with this level of acidity that's refreshes the palate. But some, like the rosé, finish with like, cranberries and cherries, and some end with like a caramel, butterscotch kind of note.
Wow.
It's crazy. That's the vintage one.
That's the vintage one?
Yeah.
And do we all end with the same finish? Or is it, depending on our body chemistry, is it different?
Well, that's exactly right. The finish and everything before, the approach and everything in the middle is all subjective. There are no right answers. The only wrong answer, actually, when you're drinking wine and you're describing, well, what's the finish versus the approach? The only thing that you could, that would violate the experience is if you said, oh, it's good. I have nothing else to say, but it's good. The whole purpose of appreciating wine and tasting is just to say, okay, good is fine, but if you scratch a little bit deeper, what else can you get past?
Right.
good to describe this wine.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. Well, we're excited for the tasting tonight. We're still cruising around Nashville and trying to get to the distributors, but we'll get there, soon here, and we're excited for that. And we're excited about this podcast. The idea behind it is to be able to just describe different finishes, different things that we're doing, and share those experiences with those of you out there. And so we'll be periodically doing the podcast through different wines, through different champagnes, different foods, and we hope that it's something that you enjoy, and we're excited that you're joining us on the very first podcast today. So David, this has been great. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. It is, and as you said, this is all about it's not just about champagne, but it's about how can wine improve our lives, and how can we go about describing it. So it's one more thing to appreciate in this wonderful world.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to learning more about how we can describe. I love that word, how to describe, the different finishes. And so we're going to dig a little deeper into that on the next time. But until the next time, everyone, thank you so much, and we will talk soon. Have a great day, David.
Bye-bye.